Michelle?
Daniel,
OG
OG
Rose?
Rose, and one of my favorite things to do is to ask Michelle what she's thinking about. Michelle, what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about?
Well, all sorts of things, but I've been reading a great book. I did reference it on Instagram, called Difficult Conversations. There's three authors. I don't remember all their names, so I apologize, but you could probably find out from
Sure.
the World Wide Web. And yeah, it's called Difficult Conversations, talking about what matters most, or something like that. I think that's the subtitle. Heard about it from Javier, who heard about it from Seth. And I think it's a really great book. I mean, I think it's a really good book. And I think there's a lot in there that's very interesting. And I think what I find great about the book that it does in general is it sort of says, like, you think you're open to talking with the other person and hearing their side, but you're really not.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So it really kind of calls you out. Like, it calls out the human tendencies, not in a just in a factual kind of observational way, where
exactly.
it's saying, like, you kind of have to, you can't underestimate how challenging it can be to really listen, to really
Yep.
hear, to not just try to persuade. Obviously, usually difficult conversations also have to do with, things that a person is hoping to change, that things might change or whatever. And so there's a lot that can feel like is on the line. And the book doesn't say this explicitly, but it sort of reveals how there's something about just the ability to actually have in a sense, a respectful conversation, one that actually takes the time to care, that does the work of what you're hoping for anyway. Like, maybe it's not in the most direct way possible, but the ability to do that and actually have the ability to hold the difference, hear from it, learn from it. Yeah, it just has me thinking about learning. Because, and this kind of relates to a question I brought up at the net on, do you have to make somebody feel bad for them to learn something good? And anyways, it's related because the book talks a lot about the things that make difficult conversations usually go awry, right? And just kind of
Sure.
they go down the tubes. Yeah. Is that the expression?
Yeah, down the tube.
Yeah. Thanks, babe. So, yeah, and a lot of that has to do with, that's a bad thing. Like, it goes badly. Basically, a lot of difficult conversations go badly.
Right.
Just how it is. That's why you need, that's why there's this book talking about it. And it's amazing how much it seems that what keeps coming up again and again is this idea of being able to actually listen, have an authenticity and a vulnerability, and how that is actually such a key in order to learn.
Right.
Like, you need more information. You just need more information from the other, because you don't, it kind of made me think about what you were talking about, Daniel, with Derrida's, like the impossibility of presence or something like that,
sure,
right?
Sure.
And there's the real aspect of that is that you will never know the other person fully. But I think that what conversation allows is almost like this miracle where you can actually maybe have presence.
Sure. Sure.
And do that to a degree. You won't ever be able to do it fully, but you have enough, right? It's like the veil unveil type of concept we talk a lot about. Anyway, but I do think that there's something that the book seems to really want to drive home about how much is going to require of you. If you do want somebody to learn something through your communication and your conversation or your anything, how much it's going to require of you to be able to create an environment for learning.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately what discussing difficult having a difficult conversation, people don't see it this way, but it really is actually meant to be it is for the sake of learning.
Right.
It is for the sake of learning. And even just in the mainstream sense of it, you want the person to learn, that they hurt your feelings. I mean, you know what I mean? It's just a learning. It is actually all about learning. So then if you really have to start to think about, like, what actually seems to function better in terms of learning.
Right.
And yeah, it's great. It's really great. And so I just, yeah, it made me think about, again, the question I brought up at the net, this idea of like really scrutinizing yourself for the sake of really being able to possibly have a successful, difficult conversation.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I mean, there's a few things. First off, I think people think they are good at having difficult conversations if they bring up difficult things. Just because you bring up difficult things or something that's hard for you to say does not mean you have a successful, difficult conversation. And in fact, in people thinking that, then when they bring up the thing that's hard for them to say and it goes poorly, then they're going to feel especially like a victim. Because one of the key issues is they fail to recognize that in a lot of situations, everybody, generally speaking, everyone feels like they're doing their best. So the problem is usually when you go into a difficult conversation, what ends up happening is the party feels like they're not being appreciated, they're not being heard, and this can especially hurt them because they feel like they're doing their best, right? Like in a funny way, there's a sense in which conversations are not difficult to have almost between people who feel like mortal enemies. Like when you see on some of these, like when you see someone who's a Republican shouting down at like a liberal, or a liberal shouting down a conservative, that doesn't strike me to be the difficult conversation that the book is describing. In fact, it seems quite easy for people to shout each other down in those circumstances. Well, why is that? Because they're kind of mortal enemies, or they believe the other side is kind of like
Wrong.
a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting is what difficult conversations like the book is pointing to strike me to be in a different context than that. It's between people who have some sort of shared investment. They're like involved. They live together. They
work
see
together.
Yeah.
I mean, these examples are just right up what you're saying, right up that alley.
Yeah, they're together.
They have,
they have to be together.
They either have to be together, well, because they're family, or they work together, or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like people you're going to be, you've got this kind of essentially more or less long-term relating to them.
Yeah. Whereas like when people in a government debate or a college campus or whatever are shouting each other down, they don't have to see each other ever again, right?
Do you think people like think of that as difficult conversation?
I think they see it and think that is an example of, well, this is the point I'm getting at. That is not what is being referred to, but it looks like difficulty. Like if you go on a college campus and confront someone who disagrees with you, that looks like a difficult conversation. Well, but really the key characteristic here, I think, is continual engagement, like your day in, day out interaction. And I think that distinction has some importance to it.
No, that's a great point. I think, too, that can kind of be this sort of funny little in the back of our head reference point, even if we don't meet, even if we would admit, like, or even if we would say, no, like, we have this other idea of difficult conversations. Sometimes those things influence how we view, I'm doing a difficult thing, and almost like I'm a martyr, or it's like we forget, we think of, the risk of that is thinking that antagonism itself is having a difficult conversation.
Yes.
When it's like, no. And this is the thing, I've been thinking about this a lot today, and like just in general, but like in the past few weeks, I suppose, but I've been thinking about, and I guess it's something I may have mentioned on a talk I may have had with Ann and Dave at Theory Underground. But just basically the point of like, which heart are you going to choose? Because the thing is that it's difficult, but in a way different. It's in a completely different way than you think.
Yeah.
A lot of people, again, the thought of difficult is antagonism, just clashing, like yelling. It's like, okay, well, we had a difficult conversation. And I think if that's all you know, then you think like, okay, you'll choose that over it being isolated, right? Or like not knowing anybody at all. So you're like, okay, good. Like this is part of us, getting stronger together or whatever. But really, it's a different type of heart. It's a much more, slow tedious almost process, and but very, very rewarding, and kind of like simple at the same time. Like, it's a different type of difficult, basically, is all I'm saying. And I think that's important to understand. And I think it's a broader concept to maybe elucidate or like flesh out. Not that I'm going to do it all here in the sense of it being exhausted here, because there's a lot to it. But what I mean to say is that understanding that is important, because sometimes we can get into our brains of what we think it means to be even strong, could be with a rubric of what it means to do the hard thing, which I don't deny that it is, and there's a respect for anyone who had gone through a certain type of hard and had a strength through that. It doesn't belittle that. It's simply to say that there could also be a different hard, which is hard to accept that sometimes, because you're like, does that invalidate what I've been through already? But actually it's like, no, it's to your credit that you found a way to push through in that circumstance with that understanding. But if you are open to rethinking your own understanding, then you could even, in a sense, have that understanding of hard be like that can evolve and change to a place where you see, oh, okay, wow, interesting. There's actually is a hard, but it's a totally different hard than I thought it would be. It's a totally different hard than I really have been kind of conditioned to believe, for example. And I think that's important, because it gives you options, and it gives you like possibilities too, and maybe even like hope.
Sure.
So yeah, that's just something I was thinking about as well.
Well, I think that's correct. I think it is also pointing to the possibilities of what relationships can open up, because I think most people think of relationships as basically a question of something to maintain that you're committed to, as opposed to, well, what if there are realities or beauties or absolutes that are only opened up to human subjectivity in relation, if they are navigated properly, and quote-unquote difficult conversations is actually the only way to tap into whatever is actually latent in relationships. And thus ultimately real. Because if relations are reality more than things, but relations in their reality is only truly let out through some sort of process, and that process is quote-unquote difficult conversations, then this is ultimately a question of how to access deepest reality, right? I think it's very important to tell the difference between the shouting match at a college campus, and actually what can arguably happen is, because like a couple says, well, we're not yelling at each other like Democrats and liberals who hate each other, therefore we don't need difficult conversations. Like, if we don't have that level of antagonism, no difficult conversation must be needed. And then what ends up happening is people can say, so if I'm not happy or feel like something's wrong, there must be something wrong with me, right?
Or wrong with you.
Or wrong with you. One or the other. Someone's going to take that on.
To take the blame.
And basically, another reason why difficult conversations are necessary is basically because otherwise that kind of scenario seems inevitable. Like, you're either going to blame yourself or blame someone else. Because life is such, due to basically the problem of interpretation, the fact that we're all we can do is interpret, and we're locked in our interpretation, it's basically inevitable that there comes to be, between people who are seeing themselves constantly, regularly, dealing with logistical challenges, life challenges, it's basically inevitable that a misunderstanding arises, right? Well, once that occurs, and people feel the negativity of that misunderstanding, if they're not able to engage in a difficult conversation to understand that misunderstanding and work through it, then basically, well, someone has to feel responsible for that. You have to decide the responsibility of that negativity, and you're either going to say it's me or it's them, and you're stuck there. And then, instead of having difficult conversations, somebody either becomes the doormat that is kind of walked over all the time, or there is a antagonistic relationship where the other side is being held accountable, and then it escalates into a shouting match, because then it's
Exactly.
ethical, because now it's ethical. So you're bad, I'm good, and then you get all sorts of problems with that.
Yeah, there's this distinction that the book makes. Well, two ones that I want to bring up right now, because it makes me think of the blaming thing, because it talks about how blame is really what they say. Yeah, the book says some sort of like phrase or something like, stuck in the blame game or something like that. But it kind of really digs deep into that, and how and why blame is actually not true to reality, in the sense that even for something that seems so obvious, like they gave this example of there was a superior they probably didn't use that, but there was a person giving a presentation for their job. Their assistant had sent them slides, and then when they went to give the presentation, even though it said final, it was clearly still one of the draft edition, so it was like missing a couple of the key slides that they had put into the final presentation. And so the person was caught off guard, had to just give their pitch kind of as best they could, and it was nerve-wracking because they felt unprepared, and it's like, well, and the assistant had sent it to him. So it's just so it's like, it's almost, our brains hurt a little bit to be like,
yes,
what's obviously the assistant's fault. It's obviously the assistant's fault. They're to blame, and we just do this as humans so automatically, because I don't know. There's something about it where it's like we I don't know. There's something about the desire for the certainty and the clarity of that, and then if it's just you, then you just have to work on it. You just have to fix it, right? And now with that example, they compare the blame with what they call a contributing system. So a system of contribution. So it's like, so what they're advising is that even for the things that seem most obvious, like most obvious, you should not be actually stuck in a blame game, because it actually is not productive, and it's not as true. It's actually not true to reality as much as you think. How could that not be true, right? But what they said is that if you want to enter into a productive conversation,
correct,
for the sake of like things being better and the end of it, then you have to think about, what could I have possibly contributed to
correct,
this, and what did the assistant contribute to it? So it's actually, to be, in a sense, I kind of think about it like both people assuming that they've done something. Not like, wrong is so loaded, right? It's like shame. And yes, in a sense, sometimes that is necessary to feel that, but it's for the sake of realizing, okay, if we both recognize that something went awry here because of some things or whatever that both of us have done, then maybe we could understand what we could do better next time. That's the hope anyway, right? And if it sticks too much on blame, all people walk away learning is that I'm stupid, I'm a failure, I messed it all up, I'll never be able to do this, and then they're more nervous. Guess what? They're probably going to do it more again. And so the assistant and the presenter, the superior one in this hierarchy, they had a conversation that went a little bit like, okay, that you heard what happened with the slides, and the assistant's like, yes, I'm so sorry, I felt so horrible about that. And then the person's like, yeah, I felt pretty bad about that too. Like that wasn't an ideal situation, and then it was kind of like this sense of what went wrong there. Like, did something happen? Kind of learning more information. They actually did the comparison, and I think the book does a great job of like, let's just play the blame game and let's see how that goes, and how much that's like, oh, that just you can totally feel that intuitively of like just our human sort of sense of like blame, But then you see it, and you see how like, whoa, that was just so unproductive, and yet it felt, in a sense, you're like, but yeah, that assistant, stick it to them. They did the wrong thing, they should get blasted, sort of thing. And then you have this contribution where like, wow, they're like slowing down, they're actually hearing what was happening there, and there was irritation on behalf of the presenter, and kind of snapping at the assistant. So then the assistant's like, I'm not going to get in your way, because like and then they had multiple clients projects that they were working on with multiple versions of the draft, so they didn't have an organization system for that. So they realized like, okay. And he, it was like, even if I'm irritated, I do need you to remind me. So like they're able to have this amazingly much more productive. Is it easy? No, but it's hard in a different way. The other one is like this sort of emotionally kind of devastating conversation potentially that can happen, and it's like, yeah, that's just the hard way, just gotta be hard.
Yeah.
No, the hard is like this nuanced, slow,
Yes.
detailed, let's consider multiple perspectives, let's think about what I did, what you did, this is still, we both agree this is wrong. And the thing is too, it's kind of like, don't you think the person knows that it was wrong? Mm-hmm. Don't you think that they think that sucks too? You know what I mean? So it's kind of assuming the best, mm-hmm. and which we talk about a lot. And anyway, I'll wrap this up, but I thought it's a good distinction between blame and contribution, because it's so easy to think to blame. It's your fault, it's you're wrong. And it's like, well, what if there's something that both people are doing that might be making this unideal? And what if you can acknowledge and really talk through what those things might be with a disposition of curiosity, you could get to a place of like actually ameliorating it, actually making it better. Right. So, and that's important. And to your point, I just think that we have sort of, unfortunately, kind of thought about learning almost as if blame is going to make you learn. And I get that on a low order causality, like we talk about, that makes sense. But on a high order causality, it's like, oh wow, no, like I guess all it really taught was, people still learn stuff, right? But they learn that like, now I need to be afraid of learning, like there's a lot more fear and other emotions that come into it that are kind of clouding like what the whole point was anyway, like what it was that you were trying to learn or like trying to teach. And so, yeah, I just think that it's hard though, if you're locked into someone's right, someone's wrong, and that's just how conversations are, that's how difficult conversations are, then you never really actually advance to actually difficult conversations, like you're saying. Right. But it's so ironic, because you're like, shouldn't it be the shouting match that's the actual difficult conversation? Right. No, it's the opposite. Yeah, it's the quiet, slow, meditative. Let's consider. Yes, there might be feelings that you share with each other. Yes, there might be, and they have a whole chapter on feelings. So like there's kind of, they go through how it's better to handle and tackle that as well in conversations. But yeah, the point of the matter is, I just thought that was very, very, very important. Very, very important, because again, it seems to be human nature, probably from a place of trying to protect yourself, to just blame. Because if you can externalize it, then you also know who to fight, who to run from, who to, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If you have to do this kind of integrated, like entangled work of the nuance, you're more enmeshed. And that's actually good for relation and connection, but it's not good if you have to like kill the person before they kill you, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people attack, they blame the other person because they're dependent on them, and there are real consequences, and the person feels like, I stepped out on that stage, I was relying on you. Absolutely. And, the consequences, maybe we lost a customer, and it matters, right? And this is your job, and you should have done it well. And all of that is true. But then, of course, the question becomes, what would actually increase the probability of this mistake not occurring again, right? You could say, well, I'll fire them and get someone else. Yeah, you could do that. But then, of course, the next person is going to come in and find the same disorganized filing system. Exactly. Like you should start assuming the best of the person, and then look for everything on a systematic systems level, et cetera, and work from there. I think people also, I think in, say, marriages, a lot of what catches people off guard is, especially after college, what percentage of your life is logistical challenges. Like it goes from a very small percentage of your time to 80% of your time. Like, how are we going to get food? How is this going to be done at this time, et cetera, so forth. And you also have logistical challenges that present you with stakes, where if these are not done well, there are consequences, right? And under all of that pressure, people engage in a blame game, basically from a place of going, you need to not mess up anymore. But of course, what that just does, well, this is the issue. Although that is true, the problem is that that's usually not effective.
And that's the thing. It's kind of like, I think that's the kind of the tough pill to swallow sometimes with it. It's like, they're not wrong that this assistant messed up and needs to stop messing up because that can really cost them. That's true. And yet, the blame game and the sense of like just being super direct with that and kind of focusing on that seems to get like actually undermine the very people withdraw. They get defensive.
Well, and once they withdraw, because this is ultimately to me what a lot of this points to, once they withdraw, you're stuck in your hermeneutics. Like, ultimately, the problem, your way of interpreting. And if your way of interpreting is erroneous or wrong, then once you've withdrawn into it, of course you're going to mess up again. Because the person they are upset at you because of how you understood the situation. Well, if you would have known you were understanding the situation wrongly, you wouldn't have done the problem, right? The problem with misunderstanding the situation or thinking you sent the right slideshow when you didn't is you don't know you're not doing it right? Like, that's where communication relation could help you, because if you're making a mistake, then the other person in relationship, in conversation, could make you realize you're doing that. But when they blame you, you withdraw into yourself. Exactly. So the likelihood of a misinterpretation that you don't realize is a misinterpretation is high.
Yeah, well, the blame withdrawal dynamic is huge and it happens quite a lot in conversation. And the other thing too is when that person withdraws, the assistant basically actually gave a very constructive and good idea, like, of, not so much like, here's exactly how we'll do it, but it's like, we have so many different versions of things, and we're all these different email threads, and it's all kind of coming in this like dump pile of these files of different versions of our projects. And the constructive idea is like, oh, I see that's quite that is like, it's hard because you just want to say you just messed up and you shouldn't have done it, and it's understandable. Like, that's what's so, again, that's what makes it so, like, it makes your brain hurt a little bit.
Well, it's rational.
But it's like, it's super rational.
So you end up in a nasty equilibrium.
Exactly. And yet, if you could be open to hearing the assistant and saying, like, their legitimate feedback and saying, wow, okay, like, I hear you, and I could see how that would be really confusing, and that's quite disorganized. And then you say, okay, let's think of a way to solve that problem. Like, if you did not hear any feedback because they've pushed away so far because they're withdrawn, because they're upset probably, and they're already upset because they messed up. Now they're more upset because they're being judged and blamed, and then they won't communicate things like, hey, by the way, it's near impossible to keep track of all these versions of files because you're sending back all these different versions, and we're trying to keep track of 5 different clients' versions of their projects. Yeah,
because in that context, if they say that, they'll be accused of making excuses.
Yes, and that's the thing. In the first conversation, the blame one, it's like, I know you, I'm sure you don't want to hear my excuses. And it's like, yeah, no, I don't. And it's just like, all you have is like,
so it can't be constructive.
There's no ability for it to be constructive. Should it have gone that way? No. Did it go that way? Yes. So basically, you want to mine it. You want to mine that for as much as you can for making it better. Because, like you said, fire the assistant. Okay. What if the next assistant's even worse? Maybe they're amazing, but you cannot just put all your eggs in the basket of the perfection of the person. Yeah. You can do a perfecting work with the person if you're willing to persevere through mistakes and stay in good good rapport with each other. You know what I mean?
To me, the key to the idea, and you've already brought it up yesterday when we were talking and before, a difficult conversation is one. It is difficult because it is hard to not slip into judgment. Like you were saying, the example of I feel versus I feel like.
Yes.
Like if you say
that's
I
what
feel,
the book brought up.
Yeah. So the issue is if I can tell you I feel upset, kind of like Aspasia has talked about this as well. That's different from saying I feel where you're just saying I feel upset. Here's a mystery. Why is this emotion appearing? Let's talk about it, right? Versus I feel like, you never listen to me. Like,
it's a judgment.
Yeah,
it's not
that's
a feeling.
now a judgment.
It's actually not a feeling. Yeah.
One of the reasons a difficult conversation is a difficult conversation is because how difficult it is not to slip into judgment.
1000%.
Like, and I think that's the key quality of a difficult conversation, is because we actually don't notice how much we slip into judgment, where we're not just giving information. We're not just telling the person how we feel. We say, I'm just telling you how I feel. No, you're not. You passed the judgment. Yeah. And the reason why screaming at someone on a college campus, for example, is not a difficult conversation is because you're indulging in judgment. Like, it's not, a conversation can't be difficult if you know what to do. Like, there's a sense in which a conversation isn't difficult if you know what to do. What you need to do in this conversation is prove the conservative wrong. What you need to do in this conversation is shout down the liberal. Well, that's not difficult. It's very straightforward. A difficult conversation is when it is not evident how you should proceed.
Yeah. And that's actually, like, that is what is realistic to life and learning.
Yes, that's right. So, like, if I tell you, a difficult conversation is one where you say, I am feeling anger. I don't know why. And then
I'm feeling anger. And you're like, because for some reason every time you do this, I start feeling quite angry. Yes. I'm not saying that's okay for me to feel that way, but I do, and I want to understand where that's coming from. The other person can get curious.
So the very bringing up of that, for example, it would be difficult for the other person not to feel judged, and like you said, they did something wrong, but if they manage to not let themselves go there and respond to you in a way of say, oh, why do you think that is? What could have occurred in the conversation? What is happening in conversation repetitive to let that occur? And then you have a conversation for 20 minutes. What would be difficult is in those 20 minutes to not at any point slip into judgment. It's like that Operation, the game Operation, where you had the little tweezers. I use this example all the time, and you had to pull the thing out of but if you hit the side, it make a buzz noise, right? Like, that's basically a difficult conversation has to have that quality.
It's precision in that
there's
sense.
a precision, and you have to be able to talk about what you're feeling, what you think, without it slipping into judgment, or the other person, because also, even if you don't slip into judgment, the other person could give into the temptation to feel judged and therefore feel justified to get upset. So there's another side to it.
People at that point will then start to do the judging too.
Yes.
Like, or even if they weren't being judged, they get defensive. And defensiveness usually will start to have judging statements, right?
Absolutely. And you may not even realize you're doing that.
The book actually addresses that. It says that even the most genuinely curious person can still what do they say? Even when you try your best to genuinely be curious with somebody, there's still going to be times when somebody gets defensive.
Yeah.
And they say that their advice for that is to allow them to not answer the question. Like, you have to genuinely let your question allow them to not have to answer it, because if you expect them to answer, game over. Like, you're not actually curious now. You're doing it because you have
an agenda.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think what's crazy to me is how much having an agenda, even for things you think are quite legitimate to have an agenda for, how much that undermines the agenda.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is just so ironic. Like, it's so ironic. So anyway, I just thought that was important too.
I mean, to me,
like, you basically allow them to not trust you. Like, if somebody gets defensive and you genuinely meant to curious, you don't insist, like, no, like, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
You don't, like, well, then you could slip into judgment there. Yeah. Well, you just never want to talk. You just you'd always get defensive. No, you just literally say, okay.
You let it be.
Yeah, you let it be.
Well, I've been thinking a lot of this.
And then you allow them to. It gives them time to actually think about your question, and maybe come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking...
That's developing trust with the person.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of having difficult conversations with Thomas Winn's dissertation on Heidegger's Letting Be, because there is something about what you're actually doing in a difficult conversation is creating a clearing. You are letting being be. You are maintaining an unfolding. And you are dwelling in the kind of the mystery of hermeneutics themselves. And that's a lot of what Heidegger ultimately in his later career is getting at, which actually I think is kind of a metaphysic that is behind what you're describing, the book is describing with difficult conversations. Because what you end up doing is, in a difficult conversation, like when you say, I feel anger, but you don't mean it as a judgment, you're actually presenting the mystery of being. Like what you're actually doing is presenting the mystery of being.
That's a great point, Daniel.
It's like, this is, I'm going to let being be. I'm not going to judge it.
I'm not going to judge it. I'm
just going to let being be.
Mm-hmm.
And can you let being be? Can you not respond with a judgment?
But and I think, sorry,
no,
go ahead,
please.
I think that this is also, I think that's a tremendous point. And I think too, I wonder if there's very little room for people, or very little practice, I suppose, for this, because sometimes it's like, because basically you have to hear that, again, not get defensive, not get like, well, you have no right to be angry, or
that's right.
Oh, well, you know, like, I don't even care, like, it doesn't even matter what you feel right now because you just need to do this, kind of thing. You just literally are able to say, like, no, like, I am welcoming you to expose the mystery of being, and we can sit with that, and I can share how that sits with me, and we can realize that there are emotions that come up, and let's think about where these might be coming from.
Absolutely. Well, what ends up happening when you go to the blame game, you're pushing them toward the technological essence or utility or at-handness, as Heidegger talks about. So you're shifting them into modes of being versus dwelling in being, right? And basically it is dwelling in being that gives us and here's kind of the key that Winn is stressing in his masterful dissertation. It is only by the letting of being be that you have any possibility of getting at something that could be reliably true. Because what ends up happening in the blame game, you're saying, this is the truth, you need to accept it, right? Well, what about postmodern critiques of certainty? What about the postmodern, like what we learned about hermeneutics? We're always stuck in interpretation, right? So the blame game denies the truth of interpretation. It denies the problem of interpretation, or says that it's not relevant here because we have enough information to make judgment. But what we learn from the philosophy of interpretation in hermeneutics is that you never have enough information.
Exactly.
There's always an interpretive gap. But here's the problem: you could let that lead you to nihilism, where you say, "Well, then we can't know anything," and then it becomes power, actually, because you actually will still end up in a power dynamic, even if you realize we're stuck in interpretation. If you say, "Well, we're stuck in interpretation, we can't know anything for certain," well, then if we're going to make this business work, we'll just have to use power. Then it will be whoever has authority. Well, that's no good because now you're getting the same problem just from a different direction. Blame game and the power game are the same game in different clothing. Well, what Heidegger stresses, and that Winn is stressing, is that the inability of escaping interpretation means that the truth is not found in an interpretation, but in the continual process of interpreting. And that's what you're doing in a difficult conversation. Like, you're not letting interpreting slip into judgment. You're keeping it in interpretation, right? So you're letting being be, because being is the appearing of that which is interpreted. So when you stay in a mode of interpreting, you're letting being be, because you're not closing being into a being. Being is the appearing and unfolding of that of which is interpreted. So staying in a mode of interpreting is staying in a mode of letting being be. And I think what I would say is that Heidegger, toward the end of his career, gets very interested in poetry and language, and he comes to strongly understand that letting being be is tied to language and new forms of language. But here's the issue. The argument I would make is that that is indeed a powerful practice of an individual to let being be. But what about in relationship? How do you do it in relationship? Well, actually, it's going to be more like what you're reading in that book on how to have difficult conversations. That's going to be more of actually getting at the means that we relationally let being be. And I think, reading poetry and doing art could perhaps make you prepared for doing that work, but it's going to actually be more of resisting the blame game. Because that's basically, in a sense, to resist judgment in situation is equivalent to resisting a stable meaning of a term individually. Like, that's what the idea of poetry is that you're not letting signifiers be stable signifiers. You're trying to keep water from just being a definition. You're trying to make it alive. And that thus moves you toward being. Well, you see, that's what you're doing in poetry. So likewise, when you refuse to judge a situation, you're letting the situation be. It doesn't get a definition and therefore die. You're keeping it in a certain unfolding. So I think, in a very real sense, having difficult conversations is precisely the work of, in relation, letting being be, and letting that unfolding be the truth. And then the truth is how to keep the unfolding going, how to maintain the unfolding, and like, instead of firing the person to create a system where they can do a better job, well, that would let the unfolding continue because the relation is maintained. And so there, I think there is a way to view a lot of the question of having difficult conversations with a later Heideggerian metaphysic.
Yeah, no, that's great, and yes, we love Thomas Winn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that that's great, and makes me think about one of the other concepts in the book about listening. And it's funny, like, you more or less think you know how to listen, right?
Right.
But the book does really show, it's like, okay, I see. It's actually, it's much more difficult than we think it is, in the sense that it requires more of, it requires quite a bit of you. And it's funny because listening is a clearing, is it not?
100%.
And so that relates to what you were just saying on Heidegger. And what I really loved about that section, I don't know that I'm quite finished that section yet. I'm nearing the end of the book, but I realized that there was this beginning section that I missed somehow, and I'm like, on the blame.
Sure.
Javier brought it to my attention, and I was like, how did I miss this? This is gold.
Yeah.
But anyway, basically the listening aspect of it, it was actually talking about how if you insist on somebody else listening to you, and they don't be surprised. Don't be surprised, because you're not listening to them.
Right.
So just, and it's like what you say, Dan, what you judge is what you become, right? So if you're insisting on somebody listening to you, even for good reason, even for good intention, don't be surprised if they are not listening, because you actually are not listening to them.
Yeah.
And that's where this idea of the clearing comes in. It's actually a miracle, because somehow in the clearing, you actually are much more likely to actually, if you were hoping to achieve, because it talks a lot about purpose when you have a difficult conversation, like, what is your purpose for talking about that, right? Like, are you just trying to bash the person, or are you trying to kind of solve a problem, right?
Right.
Okay, you shouldn't really be doing this type of behavior. So that is what I want you to learn. That's the purpose of this conversation, right? However, somehow, miraculously, when you listen, you start to and get curious. And not just listen, because it's hard to listen, and it talks about this in the book, if your inner dialogue is just like judging, is like fearful, is like, well, if I don't just ram this in, they're going to be, bad. If you can actually listen and get curious and ask actual questions, not just like ones that don't really, that are too, talks about like false questions basically and stuff like this. But if you can actually listen, you provide the space for the clearing, and then it comes forth in that. Like, that's the unfolding comes forth to the place where, like, now that you've listened, the other person actually is able to listen to what you are saying.
Yeah.
And then the whole point of why you're even talking to them is so that they can come to understand why X matters, or why certain behavior would not be appropriate, or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
That's
so, it's crazy. Like, these simple things that are just so profound, and so easily looked and missed because we haven't really just thought through, what does it really mean to listen? What are the things that keep us from listening well?
Well, to me...
you got to listen without thinking about the next thing you're going to say. You got to listen without
well,
thinking about how you're going to persuade
he'll talk about the difference between listening and hearing. And that for him, listening even, is a great mystery. Like, what is it we even do when we listen? What is listening? And yeah, it demands a lot of you. Well, the other thing that I think is part of the problem big time is that most people, even people who think, like, most people have a judgment and then they say, but I'm willing to change my judgment. If the person convinces me, it's like, this is what I think's going on. This is what I think. I think the person did this wrong. They're in the wrong. But I'll give them a chance to explain themselves and then I'll change my perspective. No. You can't have judgment. You can't start in judgment. You can't get to being from a being. Exactly. You have to start in a clearing. I really do think most people think they're not judgmental because they're willing to change their judgment.
Yeah.
If you have a judgment, you're off. Like, you're starting from a foundation where the person has to prove to you to change. So you've got an agenda. Like, even if you say, well, it's an open agenda, because I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying this is what I think happened. You basically have to not think what happened. Like, there's a very odd way. That's why Heidegger is emphasizing nihilation. Like, you have to not start from a being to being. You somehow have to start in a clearing. You have to start in nihilation and then open being. Now you would say, well, how is that possible? How do you start a space from not having a position? Well, by negation, by annihilation, because yes, you're going to enter that conversation because the slides went wrong, but the reason you're entering that difficult conversation is because of an event that happened in the world. The slides were wrong. That doesn't mean you have to start with a judgment. You have to start in response to that thing going wrong, but you can, and no doubt you have a judgment that was wrong, but you could negate that judgment when you enter into the conversation. It can get you to the conversation, but then you leave it behind. Like, you leave it behind once you enter into it, and you let being unfold. That's the tricky move that I think Heidegger's getting at, that basically screws up most conversations, is like, you're going to start from a being to get to being, but you can negate a being at the clearing. Like, you leave it behind once you get there. Then you say, okay, leave it behind, and now I'll let being be.
Yeah.
I had to, from a particular orientation, get here. I had to enter into this difficult conversation from a particular judgment and understanding. Yes, but now that I'm here, I can leave it behind. Now that I'm here, we're just going to let it unfold.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess the judgment element of it is, it's funny because, like, having the presentation that's missing slides, that in and of itself is not a judgment.
Yeah,
it's just a thing.
It's just a thing.
It's just a thing. It's not good. It's not bad. Like, in the sense that anyone could look at that and just be like, "That's a presentation."
Yeah,
like, nobody would even know, right?
They may not even know.
They may not even know. However, the people involved know what it means. So to them, they're judging the slideshow without the slides they need as bad. That's where the judgment is. Okay,
intention.
So the judgment, like you said, a being exists in the reaction to the entity,
facticity.
right? The facticity, which is just a fact. It's not like it's good or bad. It's just a presentation, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
But what it caused for the presenter is what they judged as bad, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And they could say, well, it wasn't even a judgment, it just was bad. But this is the thing, you still made a judgment.
Yeah.
You made a judgment that was a bad thing, and it was. But it was also a judgment because for the other person, it's just a presentation. If he did a really good job, somebody in the audience would not know that was the wrong presentation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and maybe they see that the slides are missing, but he does such a great job on his feet that is actually what we get to say. They go, hey man, we actually noticed the slides were missing, but you made it look like they were missing. That's really impressive.
Yeah,
now we weren't going to hire you, but actually now we will. Now we'll do the sale or whatever.
Exactly. But, then you move into being because you allow, like, it made me think of the annihilation, where sometimes, like, recommend advice, though they didn't say this necessarily in this book, I don't think. Don't quote me on this. But is to literally just take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And if you're in proximal place, like this assistant and presenter, I don't think they were in the same physical location when this happened, okay? But a lot of people are in the same physical location when something kind of tense arises, right? When something happens that, you know, becomes the A being, right? A judgment happens somehow, or like it's obvious that somebody's upset, or it's obvious that somebody dropped something that was important, whatever it is, you know. And taking the breath does in some way, to me, represent a type of like practical sort of a step of the body that does a type of annihilating.
Yeah,
in a sense
completely.
that and because usually when that breath happens, it also gives everybody a window to sort of like maybe even come to the same page of like, we all know this wasn't good.
Yep.
You don't even have to say it. You don't have to even be mad about it. You don't even have to yell. You just both all know, yeah, that wasn't very good. Yep. And the person's self, you know, in a sense, you do need some sense of self correction and like, I didn't like that I did that thing. That wasn't good. I don't want to do that. But you're focusing on that instead of, I don't want to be yelled at.
Yeah.
I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be blamed. I don't want, you know. So it's like, it's so important. Like, it's so crucial because annihilating is, to me, what allows actually the truth to reveal itself, to unfold, for everybody to just apprehend now. We just apprehend it. And then you say, if you trust the person and you assume the best about them, you realize they know that's not right. So then they can see for themselves and they can actually use that as an evidence of this doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Not the person blaming me.
Yes.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Right.
I don't like that.
Right.
And you're going to focus so much on that you lost the beautiful, precious...
Unfolding.
Yeah, the precious gift that was the unfolding of the negativity of that feeling, which would have just happened in a clearing. Yes. And it's so hard, though. Somehow, this is why my question came up of like the bad. Do you have to do bad to make the person feel? I'm like, the risk of that, though, is that, and Thomas Strachan and I talked about this. The limit presents itself as, in a sense, that's like also a clearing, right?
Yes.
Like I think about it like there are edges of a clearing in a forest, for example. What that means is that the limit itself will already give a sensation, a sense of that. Well, you hit the limit.
Well, what ends up happening?
So that should be like the lesson in a sense. You know, you want that to teach as much as it can. You want that to teach as much as you can.
Well, so there's a few things. Negativity is precisely giving you direction to take things, like how being is like, so this notion of letting being be, so letting being unfold. Well, how do you do that? What does that mean? Well, there has to be some kind of steering mechanism in reality itself, actually, not in your judgment, but in reality itself, that is an indication of how being how being in itself is being, right? That's negativity. Negativity is precisely like when you feel negativity, that means you're going, like being is trying to move in a different direction. Like not like through the negativity, not in denial of it, but it's trying to be safe. In the same way that if like with your body, if your body is a profound coordination of metageometry, to say something very large, then tension in the arm, pain in the arm, is not an indication that there's something wrong with your arm, but that you should move it differently. Like if you get back pain, maybe that's because when you walk, you're always walking on the tips of your toes. You're not using your whole foot to walk, right? So pain is an indication of
necessary movement. Right?
Yes, of necessary movement. That's right. It's not an indication of there's something wrong with my back.
Exactly.
Therefore, I get a back surgery.
See, that's so good. Yeah, go.
So, you know, that's what most people do, right? They say, my back hurts, therefore I need a back surgery. Well, maybe that pain is telling you to use your whole foot when you walk. Likewise, when people say this employee messed up the site, so well, I need to fire them and get a new employee. No, maybe this mistake is an indication of a system overhaul that you need to do.
Exactly. And that is, yes, because it's so tempting to just say, you're wrong. Then the person's left feeling like, I'm wrong, I'm bad. And then you literally you're getting, it's like, it's immobilizing.
You go, my back's bad.
It's immobilizing.
And then you tell everyone I have a bad back, and you live that story.
Well, also you tell yourself, like, I'm a bad person, I'm a bad person, and you're just like, you've immobilized yourself. You've, like, fixed yourself in this kind of, in being fixed, right? Oh, well, we're going to fix this problem. Like, you get fixed. And then you're just like, and you're a nervous wreck.
So
and then there's no movement there. You need movement. You need movement in order to actually solve the problem.
Correct.
That's the whole goal, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, but you have to interpret the signs correctly in the sense of the pain is helping you solve the problem, and the problem is you're not using your body well, right? Like if your back hurts, you could interpret that pain as meaning you need a back surgery, which would be the technological essence that Heidegger warned about, or you can interpret that pain as an indication of using your whole body differently, or thinking holistically.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe this back pain is an indication I have the wrong job. Like you think about the quote-unquote system, and like with the slide show, you think about the system, right? So basically in those examples, you're moving from the negativity to the being. Like you see, you're going to the entire being of the body, the entire being of the, and like the unfolding. So negativity is in reality itself. And that is actually steering being. It's steering the body. Like it's steering you to use your body in a new way. It's steering you to do the organization according to a new system. It's steering you to do relations in a new way. And the funny thing is negativity is actually steering things toward their fullness. Negativity is not steering things toward their destruction. It's steering things toward their fullness. It's the misinterpretation of negativity that leads to destruction that then we blame on negativity.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
We tend to blame destruction on negativity. Like if our back hurts and we get a back surgery, we blame our back for the back surgery.
Absolutely.
Instead of going... oh wait, no, the back was actually showing me to walk differently with my foot, and now I have more energy in the day because I've changed my entire body posture.
That makes me think of blame versus contribution, right?
That's what we're
how
getting
is my
at.
life contributing to this problem? Not the blaming your back, you know?
So what ends up, so it's kind of the Gurdjieffian energy getting captured thing. What ends up happening in blame is the energy of negativity, which could actually be steering toward intimacy, a better system, and a stronger relationship, gets captured in the exchange, and so a bomb goes off. Right. So likewise, the pain in your back gets stuck in your back because you don't change your walking.
The bomb goes off.
Yeah. So the bomb goes off and you get a surgery. Right. So the energy gets captured in the bad PowerPoint. It's just blamed on the employees, so the system's never improved, so the company goes bankrupt, right? So the negativity gets captured because the negativity,
that's a good point.
We don't let the negativity be. We correct it. We make it. We get rid of it.
Yeah, we
cancel it versus go with it versus let it unfold. Like if you're saying this, my back hurts. So let that unfold through the operations of the body versus
operations of the body versus an operation.
Or an operation. Because that's kind of the difference between letting being be and the technological essence. Like if you let being be, your default is to say, my back hurts. The back is part of the body. There is something in how I'm using the body that is not letting the body be. Therefore, what am I doing in the body that is not letting the body be? Right? Technological essence is when you go, my back hurts, therefore I get something external from the body that will fix it, a utility, right? And basically Heidegger's warning, our entire ethical system is now based on technological essence. So likewise, if you have a bad PowerPoint presentation, rather than say I need to get someone outside the business, a new employee, and bring them in, I need to get something outside, this is actually an indication of something about the business itself that is keeping it from unfolding in itself. Like there's a way when Heidegger talks about being, it is a certain sort of, it's the thought of being is being in itself to itself versus getting a being to correct a being and then you're not dealing with being because you're not dealing with the unfolding. But the negativity is actually the unfolding. It is the unfolding. It is the directionality. It is the showing you. It is the unveiling of the means by which being be, to let being be. But because very importantly, judgment is actually a release of negativity. Like judgment seems like don't be judging. Like we think of judgment as negativity. It feels good to judge. Like you're actually escaping the negativity. Actually, so you're not letting the negativity be.
Yeah.
So this is the issue: is that judgment is not negativity. It's the release, the catharsis. It's the releasing, the avoidance of negativity.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Exactly.
So that's why
Judgment is the avoidance of negativity.
Yes. So judgment is the avoidance of negativity, and if negativity is the means by which being bees, then judgment is to avoid letting being be. So there's no being, and following classical thought, if there's no being, it's a privation. It's death. It's evil. It's a self-effacement, right? So judgment is, and one of the reasons we, I think, miss this is because actually we've learned that being judgmental is a sin. You can say it's wrong to judge. So in your mind, you think so in your mind you go, being judgmental is negative.
I know that's wrong, so I'm not judgmental because I know being judgmental is a negative thing. It's a bad thing.
Yeah, that's correct.
All while we don't acknowledge how we are actually being judgmental.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is actually our catharsis, because we're just implementing justice.
Yes, we're just implementing justice. Yeah. That's exactly right. So there's a concealment of the catharsis, and then also, because we associate, in addition to that point, because we associate being judgmental with a bad thing, we don't think of it as a escape from negativity.
Yes.
We think of it as part of the negativity. Yes. When I am arguing that judgment is getting rid of negativity, and then I'll give it to you, since negativity is the means of being, then to go into judgment means there's no being. Well, and if being is relationship, because relations are ontological, then of course judgment means there's no relationship. Because there's no being, dang it, and being is relation. It is relational.
Yes, absolutely. And I think when it comes to letting it be, this unfolding of the relation, the book is not just about like never talking to somebody passively, just letting any and all negativity happen without ever getting curious.
Well, the irony,
the book is that
the irony, I'm sorry to jump in. I mean, the irony is that you can't let being be if you're passive.
That's the thing. Like, in a sense, passivity is also avoidance, right? Just like absolutely. Judgment is avoidance of negativity, right? Even though we all think it's negativity, but it's avoidance of negativity.
It requires incredible activity to not slip into judgment.
Yes, and that's actually where you start to, the letting be is I would dare say it is the curiosity.
Yeah.
Because you how can you let something be unto you if you're not inviting its unfolding to be witnessed, right?
Judgment is when you're not curious about the negativity. You've concluded the negativity. You've concluded it, finished it, and decided what it means. So there's no curiosity. Judgment is the end of curiosity about negativity.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, absolutely. And I think I'm simply saying that too because, when it comes to letting it be, it can be, and we've had quite extensive talks with Winn and that about this concept, right? But I think that the letting, that's why I like when he uses that a lot, because there's something kind of, like you're saying, there's something that's quite active in having to not slip into judgment, to remain open and curious, to engage when somebody clearly needs to share something that they're feeling, or something that's bothering them, or something that they have positive to share, but it's hard for them to share for whatever reason it is. Maybe they didn't ever know how to express even positive feelings like love or affection or whatever. So it's the letting. So that to me is tied in with the curiosity, or is curiosity itself in many respects.
Yeah, I think basically very often when people talk about resonance or intimacy or wanting to feel closer with people, what they're actually saying is they want to let being be. Like, that experience of being is the experience that I think most people have glimpsed, at least, or had moments of, that, they obviously would not word it as Heidegger might, but it is basically letting being be. And it's when you're with people of whom you don't feel judged, right? People say it all the time. I don't feel judged around it. Well, what does that mean? That around this person you let being be. The unfolding occurs. Well, you feel intimate. You could, like, people that feel geopathic around, those are spaces of non-judgmentalism. And it feels in the geopathic, as you, Javier, and Joachim have spoken about, that something is unfolding, right? Something that's transcendent of clock time. It feels more ecstatic. It feels more creative and alive. Well, that's all what Heidegger's pointing at. I mean, that's all what Heidegger's pointing at. And I think, again, the notion of difficult conversations is absolutely the work of, in conversation, letting being be. Like,
can I just say this really quick? I think I keep on bringing it back to this active curiosity because, and this is, it's simply to tease it out because in my head, I think of a phrase that people say sometimes, just let it be.
Sure.
Which is a good thing. In a sense, it's also similar,
Sure.
right? Where you let it be. Stop, like, bothering with it so much, or stop bothering the person so
Sure,
much.
sure,
Just let it be.
sure.
But if you completely, like, some people say, let it be, and they walk away.
Yeah, that's
and it's
very
like,
different.
That's different. That's not the letting.
No, for Heidegger,
it might require you to step away.
very
but
fair. But Heidegger means like letting the becoming become.
It's like letting the river rush or something.
Yeah, letting
like
the
that,
river rush. It is not a certain put down and forget about.
Yeah.
Let be is remarkably active.
Yeah.
But the activity is a certain holding back.
Yeah.
And I think Hegel's the same. It's a certain, I'm going to, in this conversation,
not jump to conclusions,
avoid judgment.
You can jump to questions, but not judgments.
Avoid, I feel triggered, but I won't act triggered. I'm not afraid to be triggered. I am triggered, but I'm not going to say I'm triggered. I'm going to actually let that steer me. Like, triggering does not mean the other person did something wrong. It means that this is actually this is the experience we need for the directionality of the unfolding of being.
Or maybe it's like not acting out the being triggered, like where you're like your heart starts racing, you start getting sweaty, or you're like, it's like you can just simply admit again. Remember this mysterious thing. I feel triggered by that.
Yeah.
And it's almost to yourself. You're like, I'm
learning something about myself.
Yeah, for real. Because you're like, I didn't really expect to be triggered by that.
I did not know. So I am. I am a mystery to myself.
Yeah.
Like, basically.
Or you could say, I'm triggered by that because, now that I think about it, every time this person would get upset with me. So for whatever reason, now, like, whenever I step, whatever it is, right?
There's a way. Thomas Winn in his dissertation emphasizes that he'll talk about the riddle of being. The riddle, like, being is a kind of riddle, and truth that avoids a postmodern annihilation that goes too far is the very fact that if you can experience something as a riddle, then that in of itself is a disclosement of an actual truth. Like, not the answer to the riddle, but the very intelligibility of knowing something is a riddle. Like, that is a truth. And then the entertaining of that riddle in its riddleness is then actually not going to fall into the mistake of a truth. It will be truth as this holding of a riddle. If one went into conversations basically treating it as a riddle in this sense, or being like a mystery, it's like, I'm feeling these things and I don't know why, and it's a genuine sort of space of mystery, then people getting furious and upset would not be there, because it's a genuine mystery. And if it's like, I'm a mystery to myself, I don't know why, this is happening, or this is happening, why? I am feeling this, why? And you have a more, philosophical mindset about it. That would change a lot. And I do think the book is pointing in that kind of direction.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's all wonderful. And really quick, the mystery point. I think there's also this idea of, it's both a mystery and it's also just, it is like it's very much the sense of, but it just is the case that way.
But the Heideggerian
it's an aspect
move
of you. It's that bubbling up of something within yourself that is asking to be heard, seen, understood. And that's where the curiosity could come in. And then you might start to make some connections. Or maybe you're very clear with yourself about why you seem to always get upset by this thing. You know, it could have something to do with your history, your family, your whatever. And it's like, but, you know, the other person doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So it
There's a
still might
mystery.
be very, very mysterious to them. Like, oh, and then also then suddenly, like, the unveiling starts to happen,
Yeah,
right? And
that's
you're like,
right.
they're like, oh, I never knew that.
Yeah.
You know? And
Yeah.
it's this beautifully humbling and powerful opportunity in conversation.
Yeah, well, you said it earlier. The great enemy of all of this is obviousness. You know, oh, it's obvious.
Obvious.
Basically,
Mm-hmm.
if you just remove obviousness from your thinking,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great idea. That's a great practice.
Yes.
Just get rid of obviousness from your thinking.
Yeah.
All that really doesn't help you at all.
No.
If it's obvious, then observe it. And if you can't observe it, it's not obvious.
Yeah.
You know, if you can see it in front of you, okay. But we think a lot of things are obvious that aren't at all.
Yeah.
Obvious is just a power word. It's a dangerous power word.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the move with Heidegger isness is a mystery. Like, if you know, on that idea was like, well, it just is. I just feel the anger. Heidegger would be like, yep, that is self is a mystery. Like, that you can, that I just feel anger. Like, it just appeared. It just manifests. Like, how did it manifest? What are the conditions of possibility that it manifests? Like, reality in its presentation of itself presents a mystery. Like reality, let's put it this way. Nothing in reality can appear without being a mystery in its appearance. Like, because I can look at the book on the shelf and ask, how did it get there? What does that book mean? Like, you know, what is it there for? If I don't just judge it as, that's a book. You know, if I judge it as a book, that's a book. That's that. But if I,
No mystery.
yeah, there's no mystery. But if I look at it as a phenomenon, a phenomenon then begs the question, what is it? How to get there? Why was it put there? You know, what does it mean? Like, if I let it just be there, then just naturally a feeling of mystery comes from it. So likewise, what ends up happening is that if you actually can really, really just try to stick to isness, like, I'm feeling this way. Like, that, you can just, even when I just say that, I'm feeling anger. And I say nothing else. Just state the fact.
Exactly.
You can feel in just the statement of the fact a certain sort of why. You know, a certain sort of whyness. It's basically impossible to state a raw fact without inviting
Curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah, if I say there's a book there.
And yet somehow it's like there's every fiber of our being wants to do this kind of loud expression of it to prove we're really angry or something like that. Like, I mean, I understand there's anger is, again, it's a lot of times it's a type of energy, but it's like what Aspasia talks about. A lot of times the person shattering the plates because they're angry, they're actually not letting themselves feel angry.
No.
Which is so hard to wrap our brains around.
Yeah.
But it's like they're not actually just saying, I feel angry.
That's correct. In judgment, you're not
they're
feeling
just like, they're
negativity.
smashing plates. They look like the angriest person in the
but they're
world.
actually not feeling
But, like,
it.
they're not actually feeling, because they're doing all of that so that they don't have to feel it, right?
Yeah, that's what judgment is. Judgment is to not feel negativity.
Yeah. Exactly.
It seems like you're facing the negativity because I'm telling you suck. So it seems like I face negativity, but actually I'm not facing negativity. It sounds like I am, it looks like I am, but I'm not. Well, even in the two expressions, like if I say, you can just feel the energy move. You know, if I say to you, I feel confused, versus I feel confused because you're talking so much.
Yeah. Or I feel like you're talking so much and it's really confusing.
Yeah.
It's different.
So the first one feels like, if I say I feel confused, you can almost feel that it as an invitation. Like you almost feel invited.
Like the word that comes to my mind is, that's interesting.
That's what I'm saying. You can feel.
Like genuinely
Yeah,
interesting.
you genuinely feel if I say I feel confused and drop it and say nothing else. You, as in you, Michelle, can feel a kind of interest. But if I say to you, I'm confused because you're talking so much, You feel
like, never mind.
you don't feel coming toward. You
No.
feel going
Oh,
back.
absolutely,
You
yeah.
feel recoil.
Yeah.
So when I say I'm confused, you feel a kind of attraction.
Yes,
But when I say I feel confused because you're talking so much, you feel a recoil.
absolutely.
So that's what Heidegger's getting at. The closer you stick to isness, the more you actually feel invited, the more you feel an attraction.
That's interesting too, because it's like it really does speak to like this. There's something that I remember hearing this term as it relates to children, and somebody had said like about sports casting, because like what I'm hearing in this too is observing.
Yeah.
So what it was recommending was, instead of jumping to the judgment, right? Like, you know, that was so bad, you should have done that, right? Like it's this observation. You seem to have thrown the bat down.
Yes.
It's a sports casting, because what you're inviting is a curiosity of why might you have done that?
Yes, that's correct.
Because again, the negativity will show up. It will come up, right? I feel angry because I'm not getting to play the game anymore. Or my teammates said, like my sibling or my friends said, like they're not playing anymore, or they want to do something else, or whatever it is, right?
Right.
Or I missed the ball, I didn't hit it, right? Okay, so you allow it to come forth about like, okay, there's an opportunity in the observation and the sportscasting, for lack of a better word. It's the word that's used sometimes, that allows the unfolding to happen.
Yeah.
Where actually the curiosity invites the learning process and the lesson itself.
Yeah, that's right.
You know,
which oddly is invited by isness, by the closer you can stick to isness and not move to a judgment, not move to an elaborate. The more you can say, I am confused, the more that invite, okay, why is that? Like the intimacy comes in, interest comes in, curiosity, versus I am confused because you talk so much. Then you recoil. Then you back out. You're not interested at all. You're defending. Like, it's funny because the difference between the opposite of curiosity is defense. So that's
and I think it's so interesting though, because for the best of reasons, it's tempting to just do the, wanting to jump to the judgment or jump to the assertion, right?
Yes.
About the, you talk too much, or that was a bad thing, you should have done that. Like, it's because it's like, but I want them to be sure to learn that because I care about them.
Yes.
And oddly enough, you've undermined your care.
Yes, you have.
By getting away from isness, as you were talking about.
Yeah, because there's a weird thing in which the judgment is more certain than the isness. And certainty makes you... Uncertainty is when you don't care, because now you know. It's a complete loop.
And I wonder if there's something about it where it's like actually more abstracted.
Yes.
Like there's an abstraction in the judgment.
Yeah, that's...
And then
yes,
you're like...
absolutely.
You don't feel like... That's why people who are in that judgmental place with each other don't feel like real to each other somehow.
That's correct.
Like it's like they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard. Why?
Yeah.
Because they don't feel even real to each other, because they're in an abstraction of judgment versus the isness.
Yeah, there's no judgment in nature. Judgment is a human activity.
Exactly.
And the secret is that you're supposed to use judgment to get to isness, to annihilate, to judge what is getting in the way of isness, versus use judge to replace isness or over isness.
And that's where what we seem to be kind of exposing is that the judgment actually, it's because it's a human thing, it's inevitably, well, not inevitably, it is, yes, inevitably, but sometimes on the onset it's there.
Yeah,
It's
well,
just-
of course,
it's just
you're
about-
going to
it's just-
feel when the slides are not there, you're going to feel that person screwed up. You're going to feel like there was a mistake. That's not the problem. It's not leaving it behind in the clearing.
And that's the thing. It's like weird, because judgment actually is going to be revealed in the isness, because
Yes.
they're quite tied in terms of like, because we are humans, we are going to be feeling the sense of the isness and the judgment together.
Correct.
Judgment in the sense of judging a thing for what it is,
Yes.
judging a thing for what it is,
Yes.
not making a judgment, like this
that's correct.
prescriptive, abstraction that you'd make on a person, because the thing is like, when you, it's almost like you already have a judgment. now you're doing another judgment.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that,
right.
and that second judgment is that is what is so damaging to the
Yes.
very purposes of why you want to communicate with them anyway.
Yeah, that's correct. Because because the second one means there's nothing to communicate. The case is closed.
Oh yeah. Judgment. Yeah, the gavel's,
Gavel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's down. So the case is closed.
There's no
So
conversation. There's nothing to talk about.
yeah, I mean, another way to look at it is isness is the girdle point, the judgment is the map. And you see, because and the problem is once you judge, you create an internally consistent system where you're lost in. And then you've got to justify yourself in light of that internally consistent system. It becomes a giant mess. But no, I mean, just the main kind of idea that you can just feel when you can feel the difference.
Yeah, you can feel the difference too. Like a lot of it is about slowing down.
Yeah.
Like you can feel the difference when you engage in even in correcting with a calm mind.
Yeah.
It's a completely different atmosphere and a different sensation, and allows the unfolding where then it's like they realize that whoever you're having to give some sort of like the presenter to the assistant, there's a type of correction there, right?
Yeah.
But it's also recognizing, okay, like there's often a role we all play in this atmosphere. We're all in ecology. It's not like, it just happens in a void. Oh, you're just a bad assistant.
Yeah.
No. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, in
like,
that example too, I mean, if I say to you, slides were missing, and that's it, versus you forgot the slides.
Exactly.
Or
and that's the way the way that the second conversation went with the contribution was just to state it as a fact. There were some slides in there that were not, had been in the final presentation, but were not in the one set that they were not in the one I was presenting from.
Yeah, and it's funny how that feels like the person then wants to kind of move in and speak to that. Where if I said you forgot slides, then you recoil. Right?
Yeah.
So that, like, one of them feels like an invitation into the mystery of being, another feels like the loss of being.
Yeah, and like with the sportscasting I was saying, where kid throws down bat, where it's sort of that ability to say, the bat you threw the bat, or the bat was thrown down. There's kind of an ability to say, like, did that help did that solve the problem for you, or what? Did it kind of? There's something strange about like the fact that somehow speaking to what is being experienced, that really seems to be able to unlock. Because the thing is, it's difficult because it's almost like, well, like, okay, they shouldn't have done that. Okay, right, shouldn't. It's obvious. If you can let that go, you actually kind of allow the person to, because another type of letting it be is like, it's the ventilation for what is trying to be communicated.
Yeah, exactly.
So then instead of them having to get louder and having more tantrum and all of that, it's like you can kind of, there's uncertainty with certain ages and at their development, but there's a way in which you actually allow a curious posture and an openness to recognize that you do feel angry.
Yeah.
And that's what that is. So that you also know, okay, I can actually make a statement now instead of having the loud because I can't, don't even know what's going on. It's like, oh, I'm angry.
Yeah.
You don't even have, there's nothing explosive about it. So next time, instead of throwing down the bat, you can just say, I'm angry because I missed that. I really wanted to make that shot or whatever it was. You know what I mean? So it's like, because it feels like you can, it feels like a risk sometimes, I think, to talk about this idea of isness.
Sure.
Because it's like, well, you shouldn't have felt angry.
Yeah, but
you did. I don't know. There's something about this idea. You shouldn't have felt angry. There's a place for that, for sure. But there's also this idea that if we're talking retroactively, which most of these things are, right? The presentation already happened. You missed the ball. Like, these things already occurred. So you probably already had that initial immediate reaction to it in the sense of you felt something.
Sure.
Now, maybe you didn't feel anything. But if there even has any, if any type of engagement has to happen, it's usually because somebody felt something.
I mean, there's a few things. First off, when someone throws a tantrum, there's a way in which they're not letting being be, they're being, like, and thus a being. Because instead of when you go, I feel angry, well, you're just letting the anger be, right? But then when you throw a tantrum, you're not letting the anger be, you're determining it. You're making a determination. Like you're thus, it becomes a anger versus anger. It becomes a being versus being, right? So likewise, what ends up happening is, like, it's not a problem to get upset or to be upset. Usually what I think is being spoken to, or maybe the right way to speak, is that the determination of the anger is what you shouldn't determine the anger. You shouldn't be throwing the ball, throwing a fit, or different things, right? Like the fact that you're angry is not a problem. It's that the anger determined in that way is a problem, right? And that's ultimately a kind of more advanced way to put it. But I think that's often what people perhaps mean, or should mean, actually. But how exactly to navigate that would get into the circumstances.
Well, right, but yeah, absolutely. I think that in light of the fact that people will have moments where because they'll also do sometimes in the book where, like, somebody has a round one of trying how they talk, and then they learn something from it because they're like, that didn't go very well, and then they try again.
Sure.
So, for example, like, especially if you're thinking children, because they do sometimes, they're not sure how to regulate their emotions. So then it's sort of an opportunity to say, the reason why you're doing that is because you're angry, because then there's a sense in which, I guess I'm just saying, because if there's a reactivity, and there's a reactivity to that reactivity,
yeah, sure,
the risk is that doesn't help it. So it's like kind of, in a sense, kind of showing an option for, being regulated in one's emotions, to be able to say that you're feeling angry, is to be able to give it a language to say, oh, okay, I don't actually have to smash the plate. I can just acknowledge that I feel angry.
Yeah, I mean, basically the overarching rule is, how do you let being be? How, like, a difficult conversation is figuring out how to let being be. Between it, like, that's always what you're doing.
Yeah.
And the reason it's difficult is because we naturally don't let being be. We slip into a judgment. We slip into a determination.
Yeah.
We slip into a definition. We slip into a moralization.
Yeah.
So that's why it's very difficult. But, if we think a difficult conversation is saying things that people don't like to hear, or being willing to say things people don't like to hear, then we're not going to probably let being be. And that's going to, that's going to not work. That's going to lead to trouble.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But for more by OG Rose, please visit ogrose.com, Twitter, Anchor, Instagram. I said Anchor. It's not Anchor anymore, is it? It's Spotify.
It's okay. Spotify. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You get that phrase that you use at the end, and you just keep using it, even if it's like, Twitter went out a long time ago, Dan. It's X. Yeah. I can't do that one. It's too difficult.
All these judgments clouding, unfolding.
Yeah, I tell you what. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.